Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Pardue, and I'm the CEO of Indo in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to our Window Hero webinar with Jim Turner, a steel window preservation expert in Detroit, Michigan, working to restore historic buildings in that city. Today is part of our Window Hero webinar series, in which we invite historic preservationists to speak about various aspects of window preservation. Our goal is to deepen appreciation for one of the more valuable parts of a building, the historic windows. Thank you to the many people who are dialing in today. We're thrilled to have Jim Turner of Turner Restoration. Jim is widely recognized for his work restoring and preserving steel windows, and is an advisor in Michigan to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He is also executive director of the Samuel Plato Academy of Preservation Trades in Louisville, Kentucky, my hometown. Jim was board president of Preservation Wayne in Detroit when that city demolished the historic J.L. Hudson Company department store in the name of economic development. They thought, incorrectly, that by clearing that downtown space, builders would come. Jim had argued that saving that historic building was an investment in the city's economic future, and its loss galvanized his commitment to hands-on restoration work. Jim, thank you for taking the time today to speak about the value of preserving historic windows. I'll now turn the webinar over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And I do appreciate the opportunity to take this forum of media to talk about steel windows. I want to say that certainly the demolition of Hudson's galvanized that effort in me, but it also galvanized a movement in Michigan, in Kentucky, and throughout the United States to value the places in which they live, to value the building we walk and live within. I had the good fortune several years ago to find a window restoration seminar, if you will, or 2-week immersion for both wood and steel window restoration in Pine Mountain, Kentucky. And thus the link. I am the executive director of the Samuel Plato Academy of Preservation Trades here in Louisville, Kentucky. This is our first year that we're about to end. On June 30th. But through that year, there certainly has been lessons learned, mistakes made, and wisdom gained. We're beginning to work here with the city and other organizations. Building means a training center can ask to how to train their new employees and to look toward restoration as a primary vehicle. Again, Sam, thank you. Our discussion today is going to leverage on steel windows. Some ask why. Because they are a very integral building and architectural tool to a large span of American history. We're going to work on a steel window here. What I want to do in this is just provide 3 basic areas. How do I remove paint from a steel window effectively? And I'll address that with why not chemicals, because it is easier. But I'll show you 3 methods mechanically to do that. And then to talk about how do I provide energy efficiency in my steel window, and whether that energy efficiency is equal to a new window's energy efficiency. And hopefully, we'll destroy the myth that windows are the lost leader in energy efficiency in homes and commercial buildings. Because quite honestly, they're not. They're just a small portion of the lost energy component in the overall built structure. Let's start by paint removal. As you can see, I have a sash or a casement that has a lot of peeling paint. The paint that's on this casement was latex. And never should you apply a water-based paint to steel. If there's one point that I should make, always gravitate to an oil-based acrylic paint, an oil-based paint preferably on steel and any steel materials. If you are working in steel, you could go to an auto body paint that gives you a better sheen, a longer life than most that are out. But we do want depth of color and a multitude of colors to utilize here. I would start with a carbide scraper, and a simple carbide scraper that you can purchase at Lowe's or Home Depot for about $19. But we'll move to the removal of paint. Yes, a bit noisy, a bit screechy, but very, very effective. The next method I'd like to show you is a needle scaler. I'm using a small needle scaler that I acquired from Harbor Freight, cost $25 on a portable hydraulic air compressor. Two methods down. What I'd like to show now is really Where we get to in a lot of restoration is that funky middle part. And how do we get to the inside of the window, of the casement? I like to use a 4-inch wire wheel grinder. Fenestra, in one of its pamphlets, I believe 1921, identified their method of scarring. You could do it with acid wash, but scarring the metal. And we scar the metal or pit the metal so that the primer and paint had valleys to bond to or to hook to. Very much like a plaster or the lath provides a key for the plaster to hold onto the surface. This is a small micro scarring of the metal here so that our primer and paint has a key to lock into. And I hope that from the visual earlier, you see that all the craftsmanship paint. And by utilizing a wire wheel grinder, we are able to get down to new steel, or what some would term new steel. But it's the same old steel that was there with a little bit of surface rust. We do have to recognize that there are issues in many instances with surface rust, but it's because of the application or the improper application of a latex paint on steel. And for some of you that are thinking, safety. Yes, I don't have glasses on other than my own, but please don't do as I do, only as I say. Protective glasses, certainly protective gloves will help in this, and the respirator. If you're not using a respirator, please use an NP100 mask to reduce the dust. Fortunately, I was not going to be doing this very long, but I do emphasize the need for safe working environment. We are working with materials that are predominantly filled with lead and lead paint, and in some instances may have asbestos in the glazing or the putty. So, not as I do, hopefully as I say, and forgive me for not taking the precautions myself earlier. In dealing with the steel window, sometimes there are issues related to the glazing. And a window like this that is a leaded separate glass independent glazed unit, you're going to find a lot of issues because there's opportunities here for air to get between each one of these panels. And in most instances, most homeowners fail to recognize that their leaded glass panel, no matter how beautiful it is a culprit for loss of energy. So, how do we address that? I'm going to step behind the desk here. I'm going to also offer the opportunity to glazing and the composition. I have glazing here that is manufactured by Sarco Glazing Putty in Chicago. And I like using it because it is very pliable, and when I have it made, I can get it within 2 days, and it fits the time of year and temperature so that I don't have oils oozing out. To make a repair of a steel window, note that the leaded glass window here is 1/4-inch plate. The glasses. This is non-lead, but it's zinc cane, so it is structurally stronger with about a 1/4-inch opening from mouth to it. What I've done with the utility knife or an X-Acto knife is go in place and just where the loose glazing is, I raise it out on both sides. And you need to do this on both sides because the glazing and the compound is on both sides. Some will say, well, I really don't like that putty look in color. Fine. If I were you, I would tint it. And you can use an iron oxide or go to any putty or ceramic shop and get a dye for your glazing putty. Work it into it. As you can see, that mine is turned a little from the dust of my glove. But what we want to do is work the glazing into my lead cane. And I'm really just going to use an index finger and work it in as tightly as I can pack it in my lead cane. And in doing so, what I provide is a seal and eliminate the air infiltration, and I also, stepping back to the camera, sorry, I also fill the air leaks and strengthen my window. The glazing is like miracle. And this glazing will harden to the hardness of the exterior glazing. And then I use either a rose stick or a little tool like this. Since you're going to a ceramic shop or a potter's shop, how about a potter's cutting stick? Generally made of mahogany. Feels wonderful in your hand. And jam that potting stick in so you clear the edges of the glazing. And from that point, I use whiting or plaster of Paris. Just put it on the tip of the brush. What this does, it polishes and cleans your cane, and it adds a little bit of powder into your glazing to accelerate the drying process. When you have a cane that is lead cane, sometimes you see it warping, and it's warped because it's been in the sun and it's weakened. Other times you'll see a number of cuts in it or cracks. Those can be resoldered. I would take the window out of its frame, either by removing an exterior glazing, or when you're making a repair and filling that glazing, you want to fill those gaps. And I will say to you all, never take glazing out that has a tight seal. Use your knife, your utility knife or chisel, to go around and test the glazing. And if it falls out, I would make a mixture of linseed oil and turf, 70-30, 70% turf, 30% linseed oil, and wet my old glazing because it's already hard. And I don't want my new glazing to just sit on top of it. When we look at a plaster is taking old plaster and he's going back through it, and the first thing he does when he's making a repair is open that repair wider to give himself more surface for the new plaster. But he's also throwing and wetting that new plaster. So we want to wetting the old plaster. We want to wet the old glazing here so that it provides some hydrology between the two materials. And it does not, the oils from the new glazing are not forced or wicked out by the old glazing compound. Hope I explained that clearly enough. in review, 3 different methods of paint removal. Carbide scraper, hard, use some muscle, create strong back. Hydraulic scaler, fast, relatively easy. You can control the needle placement to as narrow as 1/8 of an inch on a hydraulic scaler. So, and you also can remove old glazing from the window with a hydraulic scaler. But we have the jumbo size also, heavier, faster. For those of you that need a good tool. And finally, a 4-inch wire wheel grinder. Yes, you will go through a number of wheels, but the cost per wheel, it's about $395, $465, depending on where you are. But getting into the field and acquiring the skill of paint removal and then painting and being able to glaze and finish typically are some of the first jobs that most people are looking for. Because they have windows, and for buying a new house, they have windows that have been painted shut. The interior is that part of the casement not cleaned out at all. So you have an opportunity to do that as a tune-up job, if you want to call it that, or a first level part of restoration. It is very, very easy for a homeowner to do, and we do offer window restoration workshops for homeowners that want to move in doing restoration themselves. It started out talking about window restoration and the myth of energy efficiency on a window or on glass. When starting this process, I looked also at the number of people that have purchased insulated units for steel windows. And certainly there's an opportunity for insulated windows, but when you can make it yourself. This frame is a 3/4 inch to 1 inch frame, and what I've made here, utilizing double strength glass, a non-metallic spacer, is an insulated 1/2 inch unit. If I can do it, a homeowner can, and save yourself hundreds of dollars. But preferably, I would use 1/4 inch laminate than to go through this step. I would use 1/4 inch laminate because it provides 3 significant things. It blocks out 99% of the ultraviolet rays. It also reduces sound from the exterior and the safety factor. The laminate glass is not going to break and shatter into your home. It will crack, but the laminate unit will stay in place. And it can stay in place until you have time to replace it. There is no opening in your dwelling with laminate glass. And it is replaceable by an individual. I'm not sure how far we are in time, and I apologize if I'm running over, but I can take questions and we can talk about this a little bit. I'm not sure how far we are in time, and
Thank you, Jim. Jim, thank you so much for that detailed and really informative presentation. We've been having some questions coming in, and maybe now would be a good time to transition to the Q&A. One of the questions that came in was, could you please tell us about a time when one of your clients really thought that replacing their windows was the right thing to do, but you were able to convince them that restoration was a better option. And how did that turn out? Was the client happy in the end? Were you able to convince them to restore the windows instead of replace them? Has that ever happened to you?
I think that I can tell you both. Yes, it has. And I can tell you about both situations. There has been a time that I tried to convince a client that restoration was a better option than replacement. This is the result of that discussion. I had the windows that the client removed, and I used them as demonstration to show the effectiveness of that decision, or the fact that his loss and my gain. Dispute between the clients, and the wife wanted restoration and the husband wanted replacement. He wanted replacement immediately. And this is 5 years now since, and I believe the client is sorry for that, regretting that decision, because it's about coming up on time for him to replace his windows again. Because replacement windows typically have a life of possibly 5 to 15 years, and they start fading, particularly the vinyl replacement window, because of, if you're not getting the white vinyl replacement, the color begins to fade in the body of the material. That particular client, his failing, because the windows he chose had only a 1/4 inch of the covering of his membrane. So the ultraviolet rays have destroyed the seals on the window, and he's fogging up now. So, one example. Our argument is, when you decide to replace your windows, that is not a one-time decision. It is a serial decision, because you will be replacing windows from that moment about every 10 years.
That's a great point, Jim. Thank you very much for sharing that. We got another question from Patricia, and she has steel windows that are missing some of the vertical pieces of steel. Okay. And so how would you go about restoring those windows when some of it looks like some of the are actually gone altogether from the windows?
I do it in the same way that a wood restorer would replace the buttons that are missing in the windows that they have. This is steel, well, if you had grid, it's steel T-bar. I can cut out steel T-bar from some of the casements that I have and weld it back. A carpenter or a restoration window contractor would take and either replicate that mutton to give you a replicated mutton that fits yours. I have the good fortune of being able to just purchase flat bar and weld in a T. Weld it together, and we have a replacement for that vertical or horizontal bar.
That's excellent, Jim. Another follow-on question is, once you've restored these steel windows, you mentioned that replacement windows are going to need to be replaced again because they're not as well made. Once you restore a steel window, how long can you expect these restored windows to last?
Another 80 years.
Another 80 years. So what would be the proper way to maintain these windows so that they will last that long?
proper way to maintain a steel window.
Yes, so that they will last.
Again, I'm going to refer back to finesse. Right. I'll refer back to Finesta. And they identified that in their steel windows, when they were shipped out new, the only thing that was a primer coat, an oxidized primer coat. And only 2 coats of paint, nothing that looked like this, with paint so thick on the window that it couldn't close properly. Typically, our process is that we remove all surface paint from both sides of the window, interior and exterior. We prime the window with a direct-to-metal primer, oil base, and 2 coats of the direct-to-metal paint. And in that way, you are maintaining your windows almost as well as the manufacturer would suggest.
That's excellent feedback. What are the biggest differences between wood window restoration and restoration of steel windows? And do you do both?
I don't see very much difference. There are a number of carpenters that reluctantly, look at steel as difficult. It's just a different medium. You cut steel as you cut wood. With wood, you either use an epoxy or you cut in a Dutchman to replace a failed wood element. With steel, I would cut in another piece of bar and weld it together to replace another element of the window. It's just one additional medium to use to build and restore windows. The example that I showed you of the steel window with the insulated glass unit, I would say could be employed with mid-century modern aluminum windows. Both the aluminum slider and the aluminum casement, awning, and hopper window. Because the aluminum window offers you a full 1.25 inches of space. So you can maintain your panel that's sealed to the inside, utilizing a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch non-metallic spacer. You can apply another double strength 1/8 inch piece of glass or a 1/4 inch laminate piece to the outside to afford you that 99% UV protection and make your insulated unit yourself. I missed one point when I identified the insulated unit. A lot of people will ask, well, how do you apply that and fit that in your frame? Excuse me one moment. I would seal this or apply this unit with a butyl tape, and you can get butyl tape in 1/16 by 1/4, 1/16 by 1/2, 1/8 inch by 1/2, and 1/4 inch by 1/2. I would put a spacer between because there is expansion and contraction of the aluminum and the steel, so that I give myself a bit extra space between my glass and my frame. I would
Thank
then use one more. I would then use a RTV silicone caulk to fill that space. Because it provides flexibility, it fully cures in 24 hours, and it eliminates joint 60 to 400 degrees.
Excellent. We have time for
Those are my solutions for that.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing that detailed explanation. That's very, very helpful. We have time for one more question, and this one comes in from another Sam somewhere else in the United States. And this Sam asks, how can people find qualified window restoration experts in their state? Do you have a recommendation of how to find a good contractor to help people out with their steel window restoration projects?
The National Trust has a list of window restorers across the country. I learned all that I know about steel windows from John Seifert in upstate New York. And John has the best supply of steel windows for replacement that you can find anywhere. One of the best supplies. And I owe him everything that I know right now. The windows and the hunger to understand them better. John Lee, along with Bob Gap, out of Hannibal, Illinois. There are a number of people that are today, quite special, both in wood and steel. David Gidney in the Maryland area. Duffy Hoffman, now in Chicago. Where we're finding that we have fewer and fewer people that understand steel and work with steel out on the West Coast for the most part. And we're trying to move in that direction to satisfy the need for people in upstate Washington and Oregon and California.
Well, thank you very much for those references. Indo is also a happy member of the Window Preservation Alliance, and there may be resources available there as well. And but Jim, we're super grateful that you're out there training people, sharing your knowledge so that more people can have access to restoration instead of replacement, because these original windows are so incredibly valuable. So thank you so much, Jim, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and spent time with us to learn more about really one of the priceless aspects of every historic structure, which is the original windows. And the more we can learn about the great options for preservation that we have, the more that we can promote that as the better alternative to window replacement. So on behalf of Indo, thank you to you, Jim, and thank you to our audience. We really appreciate the time. And let's all go out there and be window heroes today.
Thank you, Sam.